Today is Friday, 22nd of August, 2025. And we're continuing with our Caitanya Caritamrta reading, Adi-lila chapter 10. So we'll begin. Agyan timirandasya gyananjala shalakaya chakshu unmilitam jena tasmaya shri gurave namaha. Gurave gaurachandraya radhikaya tadavaye krishnaya krishna bhaktaya tadabhaktaya namo namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Shwapadantikam Priya Sarupe, Daita Sarupe, Prema Sarupe, Sahaja Virupe, Nijana Rupe, Prabhu Eka Rupe, Datana Rupe, Swavala Sarupe. Adadinastanandrantir idam yache puna puna Srimad Rupam Badambojo Dulishyam Janma Janmanaha Anapita chirim chirat kurunaivartinokalo samadapaitam unnata ujvala rasam svabhakti shriyam haripurata sundurata dikatam vasatipita sada hridare kandare spuratu vasachinandanaha yam prabhajantam anapetyam apetykrityam dvaipaino viraha katara ajuhava putre titam matayo taravo vinidustam sarvabhutam hridim munimanatoshmi Bhaktya vihina aparada lakshay shiptascha karmadi taranga madhye kripa maitvam sharanam prapana brinde namaste charanara brindam bhajami radham aravinda netram smarami radham madhurashmitasyam vadami radham karuna baradram tato mamanasti katyena kapi Tabaivasmi najivami tvai vina iti vignaya radhe tvam nayamam charantikam. I'm first of all offering millions and millions of Dandavat pranams unto the lotus feet of my most beloved Gurudev, Nitya-lila Pravishta Om Asto Tarasara Shishimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And again, I'm offering millions of Dandavat pranams unto the lotus feet of my dear most beloved Nitya-lila Pravishta Om Asto Tarasara Shishimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and to our dear most Srila Krishnas Kaviraj Goswami and all our divine Rupanuga Guru Varga, my Dandavat pranams to everyone. Vansha Kalpa Tarupyascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, continuing with our chapter 10, Caitanya tree. So we see what Srila Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami is presenting, the way he's presenting it. Just like when we think of Krishna Lila, we naturally think of all the different personalities who are in Krishna's roadshow. Mother Yashoda, Nanda Baba, Srimati Radhika, all the Sakis, the Gopis, the cowherd boys, Sridham, Subal, Madhu Mangal, all of these different personalities, thousands of different personalities, constitute Krishna's Leela. So similarly, these Krishna's Kaviraj, I'm only going to mention maybe 100 or so, but we get the idea that this Swayam Bhagavan, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is manifesting with all his eternal parakas. That's what this chapter is actually presenting, the branches of the Chaitanya tree, giving us the full vision of Mahaprabhu's Leela with his entourage. All Nityasita Parikas, all have their personalities in Krishna Leela, all of them. So we understand this supports the conception fully that Mahaprabhu is Swayam Bhagavan, because many have a hard time accepting this because he doesn't come full of Aishwarya Bhav. That's not his mood, not like Krishna. He's a hidden, confidential incarnation. Of course, he does manifest various extraordinary symptoms like squirting tears out of his eyes, etc., and the transformations of sattvika bhavs that he demonstrates. But principally, he's a confidential incarnation. But now, by the mercy of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj and Madan Mohan, all of these different personalities are being described right at the beginning. So we're only into chapter 10 so far, so now we're hearing all the different devotees, the eternal parikars of Mahaprabhu. So we've come to text 86 today. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Shri Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Brinda Malira Ichaya Shaka Bahuta Badila Bodhiya Paschima Desha Saba Acha Adi-lila. Translation. By the will of the Supreme Gardener, the branches of Sri Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami grew many times over, expanding throughout the Western countries and covering the entire region. Text 87. E Sindhu Nadi Tira Ara Himalaya Vrindavan Mathura Radiyata Tirthahaya. Translation. Extending to the borders of the river Sindhu and to the Himalayan mountain valleys, these two branches expanded throughout India, including all the places of pilgrimage such as Vrindavan, Mathura, and Haridwar, because they wrote such powerful scriptures. They wrote extensive scriptures, and what they described has never been described in the day of Lord Brahma. Always appreciate the historical context, and then it gives us the gratitude to be born at this particular time, and increases our enthusiasm to take advantage of what is being offered only now. This was never offered previously. Anapita chirim chirat, not for a long, long time have these truths. And it's through Rupa and Sanatan and Jiva Goswami, principally the 6 Goswamis, and Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj, who's like a 7th Goswami. They are the ones broadcasting Mahaprabhu's teachings, etc. So text 88. Dui sakara prem phala sakala vashila prema phala vade yot loka unmata hoila. Translation. The fruits of love of Godhead, which fructified on these two branches, were distributed in abundance. Tasting these fruits, everyone became mad after them. And they're all supported by their parikars, which is what we're describing. Text 89. Paschimera loka sabha mudha anachara tahan prachila donha prakti sadachara. The people in general on the western side of India are neither intelligent nor well behaved. This means like the Gujaratis and people like this, I think. Prabhupada's a Bengali, of course, so anyway, and so is Krishnadas Kaviraj. But by the influence of Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, they were trained in devotional service and good behavior. Yes, Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami were exemplary in their practices, leaving no room for criticism from any source whatsoever. Although it is not only in Western India that people were contaminated by association with Muslims, it is a fact that the further west one goes in India, the more he will find the people to be fallen from the Vedic culture. Until 5,000 years ago, when the entire planet was under the control of Maharaj Parikshit, the Vedic culture was current everywhere. Gradually, however, people were influenced by non-Vedic culture, and they lost sight of how to behave in connection with devotional service. Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami very kindly preached the bhakti cult in Western India, and following in their footsteps, the propagators of the Caitanya cult in the Western countries are spreading the Sankirtan movement and inculcating the principles of Vaishnava behavior, thus purifying and reforming many persons who were previously accustomed to the culture of Mlechas and Yavanas. So this culture of Mlechas and Yavanas is what previously anyone who's not a Vaishnava in the Western world is ultimately Mlecha and Yavana. Because a Vaishnava is someone who glorifies God. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian. If you're a good Christian and you're glorifying God and the principles that Jesus enunciated, which was not to eat meat, etc., not to commit adultery, etc., not to steal, all these commandments that he presented to the world, but many Christians don't follow these. They do take meat, etc. So they're in the bracket of Mlechas. Anyone who kills, especially the mother cow, then they're the most fallen people. And most of the Western world are supporting that idea, isn't it? All of our devotees in the Western countries give up their old habits of illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. Of course, 500 years ago, these practices were unknown in India, at least in Eastern India, where Prabhupada is from. But unfortunately, at present, all of India has been victimized by these non-Vedic principles, which are sometimes even supported by the government. But in South India, even today, these principles are much more fully maintained than they are in North India, actually. And certainly, Bengal today, which is under a Muslim rule, is completely contaminated by the Muslims throughout. We see, for example, just a very mundane example, in Bengal, you get practically 24-hour power, electricity. The Muslims, they like their power. They're good at organizing, whereas here in UP, the power goes off regularly. It's off at the moment, we're on the inverter. That's just an example of the mindset, because the Muslims are very fond of their material facilities. So they make sure that this is just a mundane example, but the cow slaughter, etc., is rampant in Bengal. And so many uncivilized habits are present in Bengal today. So certainly Bengal is not, a place to point to a really civilized. But South India, definitely, because the Mughals didn't reach South India, and the British didn't spend a lot of time in South India. Although now they are on the western coast, down Kerala and places like this. It's full of chicken shops and so on. The Christians have their foothold there. So, but the influence of the Vaishnavas across the planet are all being inspired by Rupa and Sanatan. So we give all credit to them for spreading this higher civilization of Mahaprabhu, which Mahaprabhu was giving. Text 90. Shastra Dristya Kaile Lupta Tirtere Udara Vrindavan Kail Srimuti Sevara Prachara. In accordance with the directions of the revealed scriptures, both Goswamis excavated the lost places of pilgrimage and inaugurated the worship of deities in Vrindavan. Purport. The spot where we now find Sri Radha Kund was an agricultural field during the time of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. A small reservoir of water was there, like a buffalo hole they would call it. And Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu bathed in that water and pointed out that originally Radha Kund existed in that exact location. Following his directions, Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami renovated Radha Kund, but principally we know it was renovated by Raghunath Das. Raghunath Das, under the guidance of Rupa and Sanatan. Rupa and Sanatan were here first for many years. Raghunath Das spent 16 years under Swarup Damodar in Jagannath Puri. And in that time, Rupa and Sanatan were here. And Mahaprabhu had already been here, and he had already located Radha Kund with his servant Balabhadra Bhattacharya. Gauri Ket and Kaliket. Gauri Ket and Kaliket, these two fields with the ponds in. But it was Raghunath Das that actually inspired one Seti, who was going to give all his money to Lord Narayan at Madrikashram. and took his entire wealth to Lord Narayan, and Lord Narayan in his heart directed him to come to deposit this wealth with Raghunath Das, who just absolutely didn't want it at the time. But Raghunath had had the desire previously to build a beautiful kund and celebrate for posterity, for people to come. And this Seti finally was going to commit suicide if Raghunath Das wouldn't take this wealth. So Raghunath Das realized this was Krishna's arrangement and told that merchant, that Seti, that he should himself excavate and renovate these kunds that we have today. But it was under the guidance ultimately of Rupa and Sanatan. So it's saying here, Rupa and Sanatan renovated Radha Kund. This is one of the brilliant examples of how the Goswamis excavated lost places of pilgrimage. Similarly, it is through the endeavor of the Goswamis that all the important temples in Vrindavan were established. Originally, there were 7 important Gaudiya Vaishnava temples established in Vrindavan, namely the Madan Mohan temple. We know the beautiful pastime of Madan Mohan himself following Sanatan Goswami back to Vrindavan. Sanatan Goswami was observing in the street one day when he was in Mathura, because the Madan Mohan deity was had taken shelter in Mathura in one Chobi Brahmana. And that deity was actually performing pastimes on the street with a Brahmin boy. And Sanatan Goswami was witnessing this. This was by Krishna's arrangement. And the game that these 2 boys were playing, Madan Mohan and the Chobi Brahmin boy, was that the winner had to ride on the shoulders of the loser of the game. So first of all, the Brahmin boy is carrying Madan Mohan on his shoulders, and then they continue playing the game, and then Madan Mohan lost, and then he had to ride, the Chobi Brahmin had to ride on his shoulders, but Madan Mohan runs away, and Sanatan Goswami is watching all this, and Madan Mohan, just like cheeky Krishna, he runs away and runs back into one house, and then stands on the altar in his Tribhanga form. And the Chobi Brahmana is shouting from the doorway, "You wait till tomorrow. When you come out tomorrow, I'll get you." And he doesn't come in. And then Sanatan Goswami is amazed, and he realized this is Madan Mohan performing his pastimes. And it's a longer story, but ultimately the Madan Mohan deity decides to come with Sanatan Goswami and follows him home, walking, because he's a large deity. And Sanatan Goswami says, "Well, how will I carry you?" And then Madan Mohan says, "I'll walk." And he says, "How can the deity walk?" And then Madan Mohan says, "Well, how can the deity talk? Like I'm talking to you." So in either way, and then Madan Mohan says, "Don't look behind you. Just walk and I'll follow you. You'll hear my ankle bells." So Madan Mohan follows, and but Sanatan Goswami warns him, "I don't even have salt in my house. I just make these dry flour balls and put them in the fire. I have no time for cooking. I'm so busy, so occupied in my seva to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu." And Madan Mohan says, "No problem." But after a while, no salt starts to get on Madan Mohan's digestion. And he said, "Just please get me a little bit of salt." And Sanatan Goswami says, "Well, I told you, if you come and stay here, you know what, this is just a very ancient forest of Vrindavan." And then that day, one salt merchant's barge gets stuck on the Jamuna and can't get off. And then the salt merchant comes ashore and he sees the wonderful deity of Madan Mohan being cared for by Sanatan Goswami. And he pledges at that time, he's inspired to pledge, "If I can get my barge off this sandbank where it's got caught up, I'll donate all the profit from this salt to you, to Madan Mohan." So almost immediately Jamuna rose and the barge could dislodge itself from the sandbank, went to Agra, deposited his salt, and returned with an enormous amount of wealth, which immediately he started to construct the Madan Mohan temple we see today. Of course, he left a bag of salt before he went, so Madan Mohan would be satisfied with some salt, with his bread things that they made in the fire. But all of these temples have wonderful pastimes connected to the Goswamis with them. So this is Sanatan Goswami manifesting Madan Mohan Temple. Govinda Temple, we remember the story. Rupa was sitting quite morose because he hadn't discovered any deity. Mahaprabhu had told him to excavate the holy... They knew all the deities were there, installed by Brajanabha. So where were they all gone? They were just all sitting under the ground. They knew that. They had read from the historical points of view. So all the deities were there, but they hadn't manifested, they hadn't found them yet. So Rupa Goswami was somewhat despondent because Madan Mohan had already manifested, and he was sitting alone, and a young Brijbasi came by and asked why he was lamenting. And he said, well, I haven't found any deities yet, basically. And then this young boy said, well, every day there's a cow and goes near this Gotila and pours its milk down this hole. Perhaps you should look there. So Rupa Goswami follows his direction, comes to this hill, Gotila, little hill, cow hill they called it, and sees the cow pouring its milk, you know, not being milked, but just letting its milk drop. And then Rupa Goswami calls some villagers, and very quickly they come with the beautiful deity of Govinda Dev. So none of these deities have Radharani with them. Janava Devi later on, she brings the Radharani deity. So this is just Govinda Dev that gets excavated by Rupa Goswami. And it's Raghunath Bhatta who actually organizes the building of the Govinda temple, which originally was 7 stories tall. Today it's about 3 stories or 4 stories tall. But originally it was 7 stories tall, and the fire from the yagya on the roof could be seen from Agra. And the Mughal king Aurangzeb could see that fire from his palace and inquired what it was, and they told him, oh, it's the yagya on top of the Govinda temple. Aurangzeb knocked it down straight away, took his whole army there, and they began to dismantle the whole temple from the top floor. This was, of course, about 100 years, more than 100 years, about 120 years after it had been built. But before he was able to come to the lower floors, he was called away to battle in Delhi. Delhi was being invaded, I think, by the Sikhs at that time, for putting up opposition. And so he left. 3 or 4 stories are still there. But this is another example of them establishing the temple. And in the Gopinath temple was actually manifested by Madhu Pandit. Madhu Pandit was a great Vaishnava and discovered the form of Gopinath in the Jamuna and manifested this Gopinath temple. This was a little bit later. Then the Radharaman temple, of course, we know the pastime of Gopal Bhatta. He had a beautiful shalagram, and he was lamenting one day that he couldn't perform the same sort of shringar as all the other temples in Vrindavan were doing for the Julan. And then overnight, this one quite large shalagram just transformed itself into the most exquisite form that we have today of Radharaman, or Raman, deity. And all the Vaishnavas came and glorified the beauty of Radharaman. The Radharaman deity actually is composed of, it's like, I think it's Gopinath in the heart and Govinda in the head, and Madan Mohan in the legs. Like that, all the parts of the 3 main deities are embodied in this Radharaman Thakurji. And then there's Radha Shyam Sundar temple, which was originally Shyamananda Prabhu manifested this temple. Then there's a Radha Damodar temple, which was actually manifested by Jiva Goswami on the order of Rupa Goswami. And there we have like 3 beautiful deities there. And it was the principal place of Jiva Goswami, acting as the Mahant of Vrindavan. And then Gokulananda, where we have the wonderful deities of Lokanath Goswami and of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and of Baladevi Dibhushan. Their deities are there, and the beautiful form of Narottam Das Thakur. And in the courtyard there, we have like the family of Lokanath Goswami is in the center, and he's facing Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and on the side is Narottam Das Thakur. And Ganga Narayan is also there. So all these beautiful temples were manifested directly by the Goswamis for posterity. It's why so many visitors, millions and millions of visitors every year come to Vrindavan. So the teachings and precepts of the Goswamis are distributed to all those millions of people. And they're all realizing now, because all these temples have Sri Radha with them. Previously, Radharani wasn't manifested so prominently at all, because the smarters could not accept, like in Jaipur, for example, the beautiful Govinda deity. So this Govinda deity had a counterpart of Sri Radha that was brought by Janava Mata, but the smarters didn't want that. This was only about 400 years ago. So then Baladev Vidyabhushan wrote his Govinda Bhasya and established that Radha deity there. It's not easy to accept Parakya. And if you accept Radha, you're accepting Parakya. So this was the difficulty in spreading Mahaprabhu's mission of Braja Prem, because Braja Prem sits on the pillars of Parakya Ras. Without the example of Parakya Ras, no one will really know deeply the extent of the gopis' prem for Krishna. The gopis leaving everything. Na paryeham niravadya samyujam swasadu kritvam vibhurisyapiva namabjam durja geha shrinkala. They left everything for Krishna's pleasure. There's no higher exhibition of love in existence. And this is what Mahaprabhu wanted to distribute. So it's only through this Parakya Ras that this can manifest. So the Goswamis are establishing these temples to broadcast these Parakya meetings between the gopis and Krishna. So important. So these are the 7 most important Gaudiya Vaishnava, and there are so many others. There are more than 5,000 temples in Vrindavan, all with Radha. So of course today the mood of Radha is fully accepted. Everyone just says Radhe, 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 Radhe. But so many still in South India in particular have difficulty accepting these ultimate truths. So text 91. Mahaprabhu Priya Britya Raghunatha Das Sarvatyaji Koile Prabhur Pada Tale Vash. Translation: Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, the 46th branch of the tree, was one of the most dear servants of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He left all his material possessions to surrender completely unto the Lord and live at his lotus feet. Raghunath Das was like a renunciate practically from the time of meeting Haridas Thakur in his childhood. In his childhood, Haridas Thakur was a close friend of Advaita Acharya, who was the guru of the household where Raghunath Das stayed with his father and uncle. The guru was Yadunandan, and Yadunandan's guru is Advaita Acharya. So he had association, Raghunath had association with Haridas at a very early age. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhasya, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami was probably born in the year 1416 Sakabda and 1494 our years, in a Kayashta family as the son of Govardhan Majumdar, who was the younger brother of the then Zamindar Hiranya Majumdar. The village where he took birth is known as Sri Krishnapur. On the railway line between Calcutta and Bardhaman is a station called Trishabag, now known as Adi Saptagram, and about 1.5 miles away is the village of Sri Krishnapur. So we talked about Saptagram yesterday, where the Suvarnavaniks stayed, the gold merchants, and Nityananda gave them mercy. All these places are very accessible. You can all visit these places today. where the parental home of Raghunath Das Goswami is situated. A temple of Sri Sri Radha Govinda is still there. In front of the temple is a large open area, but no large hall for devotees to assemble. A rich Calcutta gentleman named Harish Chand Ghosh, who resided in the similar quarter, recently repaired the temple. The entire temple compound is surrounded by walls, and in a small room just to the side of the temple is a small platform on which Raghunath Das Goswami used to worship the deity. By the side of the temple is the dying river Saraswati. The forefathers of Srila Raghunath Das Goswami were all Vaishnavas and were very rich. They're described as Praya Vaishnavas, not really following deeply, seriously, the intricacies, because they were so much influenced by material wealth, etc. So Praya Vaishnavas were all Vaishnavas and were very rich. His spiritual master at home was Yadunandan Acharya. Although Raghunath Das was a family man, he had no attachment to his estate and wife. Seeing his tendency to leave home, his father and uncle engaged special bodyguards to watch over him, but nevertheless he managed to escape their vigilance and went to Jagannath Puri to meet Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. We described this incident the other day, talked about it the other day. So this incident took place in the year 1517. Raghunath Das Goswami compiled 3 books. Actually, he compiled more than 3, named Stavamala or Stavavali, Dan Charita, and Mukta Charita. He also gave us Manashiksha, Bilap Kusumanjali. He gave us a number of scriptures. Raghunath Das is our Prayojan Acharya. Rupa Goswami is the Abhideya Acharya, and Sanatana Goswami is the Sambandha. So Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. So he lived a long time, residing for most of his life at Radhakund. The place where Raghunath Das Goswami performed his devotional service still exists by Radhakund. He almost completely gave up eating, and therefore he was very skinny and of weak health. His only concern was to chant the holy name of the Lord. It's described that he was always weeping. He had tuberculosis, which was very common at the time, and he was sick. He would just eat a cupful of buttermilk daily, was all he would eat, and not sleep. His only concern was to chant the holy name of the Lord. He gradually reduced his sleeping until he was almost not sleeping at all. It is said that his eyes were always full of tears. When Srinivasacharya went to see Raghunath Das Goswami, the Goswami blessed him by embracing him. Srinivasacharya requested his blessings for preaching in Bengal, and Srila Raghunath Das Goswami granted them. In the Gaura Ganesh Dipaka, it is stated that Sri Raghunath Das Goswami was formerly the gopi or manjari named Rasamanjari. Sometimes it is said that he was Rati Manjari. So in other words, all the Goswamis, they're all manjaris, as we've said many times. This is Radharani's gift to support her dearmost Krishna's desire to taste her prem for Krishna, which is higher than Krishna's prem for her. Radharani is the Ashray. Mahaprabhu has come to taste this. So Radharani is supporting this line completely. So all her kinkaris, all her maidservants, and Mahaprabhu is giving this manjari bhav. So who is more qualified to give it than the manjaris themselves? So Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, they're all fully qualified. Even Mahaprabhu himself, in his lila at one point, takes the role of the manjari. Text 92. Prabhu samapila tanra swarupera hate Prabhu gupta seva kaile swarupera sate. When Raghunath Das Goswami approached Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Jagannath Puri, the Lord entrusted him to the care of Swarup Damodar, his secretary. Thus they both engaged in confidential service of the Lord. This confidential service was the personal care of the Lord. Swarup Damodar, acting as his secretary, attended to the Lord's baths, meals, rest, and massage. Actually, it was Govinda Das, who would do services of this. Swarup Damodar would attend to the emotional states of the Lord's consciousness by reciting so many beautiful, inspiring verses, etc., whichever mood Mahaprabhu wanted to hear. The verses of Jaidev Goswami's Gita Govinda, the verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, and so many verses he would recite. This was his principal service, because he's Lalita Sakhi. So he was keeping Mahaprabhu's mood pointed in that direction. But the personal care was by his servant Govinda Das. And Raghunath Das Goswami assisted him. In effect, Raghunath Das Goswami acted as the assistant secretary of the Lord. So Raghunath Das for 16 years was residing with Swarup Damodar in Jagannath Puri. Text 93. Sodashavatsara koile antaranga sevana Swarupera antardana oile vrindavana. Translation. He rendered confidential service to the Lord for 16 years at Jagannath Puri, and after the disappearance of both the Lord and Swarup Damodar, he left Jagannath Puri and went to Vrindavan. Text 94. Vrindavana due bariya charane dakiya govardhana tyajba deha brigupata karya. Translation. Sri Raghunath Das Goswami intended to go to Vrindavan to see the lotus feet of Rupa and Sanatan and then give up his life by jumping from Govardhan Hill. Because Raghunath had been so long in the association of Mahaprabhu and his attachment had become so thick, he could not appreciate living for a moment practically without the presence of the Lord. Just like when we read in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, when Krishna goes out of sight of even any of the cowherd boys, they start to lament, practically wanting to give up their life. When Krishna goes behind a tree, or Krishna disappears for any amount of time, they feel devastated. All the Brijvasis are the same like this. So this mood of complete attachment to Krishna is so powerful and overwhelming, and Raghunath Das is experiencing that in the form of being separated from Radha and Krishna in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Jumping from the top of Govardhan Hill is a system of suicide especially performed by saintly persons. I've often thought about this. Where would you actually jump? When you get down to Pucheri, it's probably the highest, and that's probably about 300 feet or less. You probably wouldn't die if you jump, you just break a few bones. So we know Govardhan is shrinking by a mustard seed every day. So even in my short lifetime, I've seen in 40 years Govardhan shrink tangibly, definitely. So in the time of Raghunath Das, it would have been much, much higher, of course, because he was worshipping the Govardhan Shila that Mahaprabhu had given him. Mahaprabhu gave him a Govardhan Shila and a Gunja Mala of small conch shells, and he was worshipping the conch shells as Radha and the Govardhan Shila as Krishna. Mahaprabhu gave him these gifts. These are now residing in the Gokulananda temple. You can see the shalagram there. After the disappearance of Lord Chaitanya and Swarup Damodar, Raghunath Das Goswami keenly felt separation from these two exalted personalities, and therefore decided to give up his life by jumping from Govardhan Hill in Vrindavan. Before doing so, however, he wanted to see the lotus feet of Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami. Text 95. Eta nishchaya karya aile vrindavana Aishe Rupa Sanatera Vrindaila Charana. Thus, Srila Raghunath Das Goswami came to Vrindavan, visited Sri Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, and offered them his obeisances. Text 96. Tabe due bai tanra marite nadila nicha tritya bai kari nikate rakila. Translation. These two brothers, however, did not allow him to die. They accepted him as their third brother and kept him in their company. Text 9, because these three personalities are with a spearhead, and Raghunath Bhatta Goswami also, and Gopal Bhatta Goswami and Jiva Goswami were very supportive of these three. Text 97. Mahaprabhu Lilayata Bahir Antara Due Bhai Tanra Mukhe Sune Nirantara. Translation: because Raghunath Das Goswami was an assistant to Swarup Damodar, he knew much about the external and internal features of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. Thus the two brothers, Rupa and Sanatan, always used to hear of this from him. So Swarup Damodar kept notes in his throat called kadachas, which he actually imparted into the heart of Raghunath Das. Raghunath kept like heart notes, so to speak, on manuscripts. So these are all the authoritative words that Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj is using to compile this. So the words of Swarup Damodar, I mean the amazing esoteric pastimes that were formed in Jagannath Puri of Mahaprabhu becoming like a tortoise, etc., that we've read and heard so many times. But who can describe the reality of that? You wouldn't believe it if it was just told, if it was fictitious or something. But it's completely, it's almost like they took a video, so to speak, and then transposed it into the heart of Krishnadas Kaviraj. So he could write these pastimes very clearly. Anajale tyage kyale anya katana paladui tina mata korena pakshana. Raghunath Das Goswami gradually gave up all food and drink, but a few drops of buttermilk. Text 99. Sahasra dandavat kare laya lakshanam Due sahasra vaishnavera nitya prananam. So, of course, Krishnadas Kaviraj was in Radha Kund for most of this time with Raghunath. So he could not have left his home when he was an old man. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had the association of Rupa and Sanatan and Raghunath. So, just remembering that part. As a daily duty, he regularly offered 1,000 obeisances to the Lord, chanted at least 100,000 holy names, and offered obeisances to 2,000 Vaishnavas. So actually we have a list from his Stavamala of, I think it's perhaps 100, 100 glorifications that he's offering with just 100 dandavats, but he performed 1,000 dandavats. So there were many more. So in this Stavamala, which is a Stavavali, which is a beautiful book that you can get today, it has these, 101. No, 107. 107 glorifications of all the different personalities in Braj. He starts off by glorifying the heroic devotees who have saved me from the ropes of the material energy, material desires, and he's that have bound him by old age also. Then he starts to pray to Radha Madhav, then Gandhavika Giridhari, then Mathuradam, and then to the fields, the Ghosh, the cow grazing pastures, Vrindavan, Nandishwara, Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda, Queen Rohini, Baladev, Parajanya, Varisi, the paternal grandmother of Krishna, Upananda, Sananda, Ambika, Vijay, Sridham, Subal, all the cowherd boys, Madhu Mangal, Kirtida, Mukara, Lalita Saki, Vishaka, Vrinda, Kundalata, Danista Saki, Nandimukhi, Jamuna, all the Sakis, servants, Patri, Rupa Manjari, all the Manjaris, all associates, etc. He's offering to the calves, to Krishna's flute, to the peacocks. He's offering to the cows. He's offering, it's a beautiful, beautiful meditation on Vrindavan Dham. And every meditation is accompanied by a dandavat. So this was his meditation. He offers to the Rasastali, to Manasi Ganga, the mountain Giriraj, the rivers, the deers, the kunjas, the trees, the vines, the birds, the bees, the Kadamba trees, Govinda Kund, the Anukut, feast offered in Govardhan. All of these different remembrances of Vrindavan. So we can send a file, actually we have a file with all of these 107. If you want to offer dandavats, we are following in the footsteps of the Goswamis. So if we want to get serious and offer dandavats and get the mercy of Raghunath, we can do like that, get the mercy of Vrindavan. So as a daily ritual, he regularly offered 1,000 obeisances to the Lord, chanted at least 100,000 holy names, and offered obeisances to 2,000 Vaishnavas. Text 100. Ratridina Radha Krishna Manasa Sevana Prakareka Mahaprabhur Charita Katana. Translation. Day and night he rendered service within his mind to Radha and Krishna, and for 3 hours a day he discoursed about the character of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Purport. We have many things to learn about bhajan, or worship of the Lord, by following in the footsteps of Raghunath Das. Raghunath Das is our bhajan shiksha guru. He's the prayojan acharya. He's giving us this mana shiksha. And in Vilap Kusumanjali, which he's also given us, it's a total description of the life of a manjari, Tulsi Manjari. And my Gurudev has spoken this amazing granta to the ISKCON leaders back in the 90s. So this is not in digital format, but if you want a copy, you just have to make inquiries and you can probably get one. It's been produced now, I think, by Shamarani is producing a copy. But if you want the original copy, you can get them from Radha Kund, where I'm actually staying. The landlord, the owner here, has many good photocopies, spiral-bound photocopies of this Vilap Kusumanjali. It's the most clear example. If our goal is Manjari Bhav, if this is what Mahaprabhu has come to give, then it's our duty to understand the nature and activities of the Manjaris, how they're dressing Sri Radha, how they live only for the pleasure of Sri Radhika. They're her kinkaris, they act like her shadows, they never leave her. So our whole mood is to wake up this inspiration towards service for Radhika. And this is woken up through the teachings of Raghunath Das Goswami particularly, and Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, these three particular persons, but especially Raghunath Das Goswami, because he's designated as the Prayojan Acharya by Mahaprabhu. So these teachings are there. All the Goswamis engage in such transcendental activities as described by Srinivasacharya in his poem about them. Krishna Kirtana Gana Ratana Paro Premamritambo Nidhi, etc. Following in the footsteps of Raghunath Das Goswami, Srila Rupa Goswami, and Srila Sanatana Goswami, one has to execute devotional service very strictly, specifically by chanting the holy name of the Lord. So all of these purports by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada are very inspiring for our progress, our internal progress in bhakti. How can we preach externally if we're not practicing internally? If we're not at least focusing on the internal path, what do we expect to give? Just, the basic, don't eat meat, fish or eggs, etc., etc. But if one wants to actually make an influence, make a difference in society, one has to be performing bhajan himself to inspire that amongst others. Text 101. Tina Sandhya Radha Kunde Apitata Snana Vrajavasi Vaishnavera Kara Alingana Mana. Translation. Sri Raghunath Das Goswami took 3 baths daily in the Radha Kund lake. As soon as he found a Vaishnava residing in Vrindavan, he would embrace him and give him all respect. In those days, 500 years ago, Vrindavan, it was so, we can say, rustic There was practically nothing there. This was called Arityagram, the village of Arityagram, because of Aristasura was killed here. So it was called Arityagram. But it was just a few collection of mud houses, and everything was very simple, and many cows. But so its accessibility was very rare for people. And who really at that time would want to know about the esoteric teachings of Mahaprabhu? They were more interested because previously, for so many millions of years before, they'd only worshipped Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mahaprabhu is teaching that he's not. That's the teachings of Mahaprabhu. He's not. Actually, Shri Radhika controls Krishna in Ras. So he's teaching this distinction. It's a huge quantum leap of consciousness. So 500 years ago, very few people would have wanted to come here and understand the nature of Vrindavan or Braja Prem. This wasn't on the map, basically. It's Mahaprabhu who's put it on the map. And certainly with the support these days of the Western devotees who have come from overseas with some resources and some capital, they're able to actually help develop more the opulence of Vrindavan to attract. Actually, today there's too many people here. You just in Vrindavan today, was it crowded? Wild, he says. And it's not even the season. It's not even the season. You have traffic jams, you know, outside the ISKCON temple almost every single day, whether it's seasonal or not, whether it's Julan Yatra or Janmashtami. If it's just in the middle of winter, there's still traffic jams. This is actually the covering of the Dham. We should understand that in this age of Kali, that Vrindavan eventually will become covered over by materialistic mentalities, by so many, you know, businesses, etc., industries and so on, will start to cover the esoteric speciality of Braj. But in contrast to that, Navadvip Dham, which is still covered now to a great extent, people don't even know where Radhakund is. Not even the people who live in the village of Radhakund know it's Radhakund. They call it Kobala, something like that is named. They don't even know it's Radhakund. So it hasn't even come on the map yet. So Navadvip will become uncovered gradually in the next 100 years. And Vrindavan will definitely become covered. Vrindavan's already covered. You can't even in Radhakund on festival days, it's so packed. Millions of people come. So there's a consequence to that. So it has some pollution coming with it. So text 102. Sarada sapta prahas kare bhaktir sadhana charitanda nidra seha nahe kona dina. He engaged himself in devotional service for more than 22.5 hours a day, and for less than 2 hours he slept, although on some days that also was not possible. Mahaprabhu would love to hear about the pastimes of the Goswamis and how they were conducting their lives. And we also should be fascinated and interested. How did they live? How was the activity of their devotional service? What did they engage in? Text 103. Tanhara Satanar Riti Sunite Chamatkar Shri Rupa Raghunath Prabhu Ye Amara. Translation. I am struck with wonder when I hear about the devotional service he executed. I accept Srila Rupa Goswami and Sri Raghunath Das as my guides. This is the heart of Srila Krishna's Kaviraj, revealing this to us. Purport. Srila Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami accepted Raghunath Das Goswami as his special guide. Therefore, at the end of every chapter, he says, Shri Rupa Raghunatha Pade Yare Ashe Caitanya Caritamrta Adi-lila Krishna Dasa. Sometimes it is misunderstood that by using the word Raghunath, he wanted to offer his respectful obeisances to Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. I've mentioned about Raghunath Bhatta Goswami previously. Raghunath Bhatta Goswami was not writing, he was assisting. He actually arranged for the building of the monumental Govinda temple. and he would chant the Srimad Bhagavatam in so many melodious meters. When he would chant, all the Vaishnavas would come and listen to him. It's described he had a voice like a cuckoo bird. And he would, we see the word bhatta after someone's name, it means they're a bhattacharya. It means they're knowledgeable entirely in one of the principal 4 Vedas, like Gopal Bhatta. They're completely knowledgeable in that one particular Veda. So they're very, very scholarly personalities. But he wasn't writing, he was supporting. He was cooking and he was building the temples. This is Raghunath Bhatta. But now we're talking about Raghunath, of course, in who Krishna's Kaviraj is offering obeisances to. For it is sometimes stated that Raghunath Bhatta Goswami was his initiating spiritual master. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami does not approve of this statement. He does not accept Raghunath Bhatta as the spiritual master of Srila Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami. I'd never personally heard that before. Text 104. Inha shabaraya che hoile prabhura milana age vistariya tahe kaba varanana. Translation. I shall later explain very elaborately how all these devotees met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Text 105. Shri Gopala Bhatta Eka Saka Sarvotama Rupa Sanatana Sangha Yanre Prema Alapana. Translation. Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, the 47th branch, was one of the great and exalted branches of the tree. He always engaged in discourses about love of Godhead in the company of Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. Purport. Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami was the son of Venkata Bhatta, a resident of Sri Rangam. Gopal Bhatta formerly belonged to the disciplic succession of the Ramanuja Sampradaya, but later became part of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. In the year 1433 Sakapta, AD 1511, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was touring South India, he stayed for 4 months during the period of Chaturmasya at the house of Venkata Bhatta, who then got the opportunity to serve the Lord to his heart's content. So we understand in 1510, the Lord left Navadvip. Then he arrived in Puri that same year. And then later in the next year, the following year, then he began his tour. And he was touring in South India for about 2.5 years. And then he comes back to Puri, then he goes to Ramkeli, then he comes back to Jagannath Puri again, then he goes to the Jarikanda forest, then he goes to Prayag, then he goes to Mathura, then he comes back to Prayag, then he goes to Varanasi, then he comes back again through the Jarikanda forest. So that's, all of that takes 5 years altogether. Gopal Bhatta also got the opportunity to serve the Lord at this time. Gopal Bhatta was a young boy. Gopal Bhatta was about 8 or 9 years old at that time. Gopal Bhatta was later initiated by his uncle, the great sannyasi Prabodhananda, not Prakashananda. Huge difference. Prakashananda, we've already discussed in the, 7th chapter. The Varanasi sannyasis, 60,000, under Prakashananda Saraswati. This is Prabodhananda Saraswati. Total difference. Prabodhananda Saraswati in Krishna Lila is Tunga Vidya, one of the Astasakis. Extraordinary, great personality who has written so many scriptures also. There's Vrindavan Mahimamrita in particular. And Radha Rasa Sudhanidhi. He's also written this book, Prabodhananda Saraswati. So very, very different to, it might be misleading for people to see great sannyasi. He wasn't acting in that sannyas role. It was Prakashananda who was the sannyasi. Prabodhananda Saraswati wasn't really a sannyasi. He was a Babaji. He was residing in Vrindavan. Both the father and the mother, actually, I once asked Shamrani, I said, there seems to be a few mistakes in this Caitanya Caritamrta. She was working on it. I was just watching her amazing podcast the other day on Nam Ras show. And it's really, really enlightening what she has to say. She has so much history. She was initiated back in 1966 or 67. So her historical recall is really exceptional. So she remembers clearly when this was being compiled by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada in 73, 74. And it was actually published in a very rushed way. In just a matter of 3 months, these 17 volumes were actually put out on the market, which is such an accomplishment and such an achievement for those devotees at the time. But, as Sharmarani said, it has many, many mistakes in, by the editors in particular. It's not all cast in gold. For example, like a word like sannyasi was probably one of the editors that chose to put it in because it's misleading. Because when you read great sannyasi, you think automatically of Prakashananda Saraswati. He was a great sannyasi, but Prabodhananda Saraswati was a Babaji. He was not a sannyasi. He was exactly like a sannyasi, as was Rupa and Sanatan, but we don't call Rupa and Sanatan Maharajas. They were Babajis. They weren't walking around with a danda. They didn't need a danda. That wasn't their profile, so to speak. So Prabodhananda Saraswati would have been better without this word sannyasi there. Both the father and the mother of Gopal Bhatta Goswami were extremely fortunate, for they dedicated their entire lives to the service of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They allowed Gopal Bhatta Goswami to go to Vrindavan, and they gave up their lives thinking of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's also said in many other descriptions that actually Gopal Bhatta waited until they left their bodies and then he came to Vrindavan, as did Jiva Goswami, the same. There's another one. No, I think it's just Gopal Bhatta. When Lord Chaitanya was later informed that Gopal Bhatta had gone to Vrindavan to meet Rupa and Sanatan Goswami, he was very pleased, and he advised Rupa and Sanatan to accept Gopal Bhatta Goswami as their younger brother and take care of him. Mahaprabhu has a mission, and the mission is actually under the guidance of Sri Radhika. All of these personalities, Gopal Bhatta Goswami is Guna Manjari or Ananga Manjari. They're all Manjaris. Why are they all Manjaris? Because it's Radharani wants to serve Lord Chaitanya's mission. So she's sending her most close and dear, most intimate associates, the Manjaris, to broadcast this line of Manjari Bhav. Don't anyone be any doubt. This is why Mahaprabhu has appeared. This is why our line is the way it is. If you're in this line, it's a line of Manjaris. Don't think it's a line of Gopals, cowherd boys. It's not. It's a line of Manjaris. That's who it is. And all of their teachings, they all have that flavor. When you look closely at that, it's our duty to read these divine books that they've given us. Actually, Gopal Bhatta assisted Sanatan Goswami principally in the same way that Jiva Goswami assisted Rupa Goswami. Jiva Goswami was like the secretary for Rupa Goswami, collecting the manuscripts, collecting his parchments, the inks and everything. And afterwards he was publishing. And Gopal Bhatta was doing the same for Sanatan Goswami. This Hari Bhakti Vilas is a huge, voluminous work. And Sanatan Goswami would just write it down in codes practically. And Gopal Bhatta Goswami would open that out. He knew exactly what Sanatan Goswami was intimating, and he would write, and Brihat Bhagavatamrita is a huge, voluminous compilation also. So Gopal Bhatta was assisting in the same way that Jiva Goswami was assisting Rupa to publish all of Sanatan Goswami's books. Mahaprabhu was very pleased, and he advised Rupa and Sanatan to accept Gopal Bhatta as their younger brother and take care of him. Sri Sanatan Goswami, out of his great affection for Gopal Bhatta Goswami, compiled the Vaishnava Smriti named Hari Bhakti Vilas and published it under his name. But actually it was Gopal Bhatta who was doing the collating of that and the editing of that. Under the instruction of Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, Gopal Bhatta Goswami installed one of the 7 principal deities of Vrindavan, the Radharaman deity. The Saivite priests of the Radharaman temple belong to the Gaudiya Sampradaya. So we're getting the brief history here. It's very brief because there are many other books that are written supportive of these personalities, which we should hopefully be inspired to read and become more familiar with these personalities. Just like I described at the beginning today, all these personalities are the Nitya Siddha Parikars. So these are all parts of Krishna's roadshow, parts of Mahaprabhu's roadshow, so to speak. So getting familiar with them all increases our appreciation for this personality of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami took permission from all the Vaishnavas before writing Sri Caitanya Caritamrta, Gopal Bhatta Goswami also gave him his blessings, but he requested him not to mention his name in the book. Therefore, Krishnadas Kaviraj has mentioned Gopal Bhatta Goswami only very cautiously in one or two passages of the Caitanya Caritamrta. He didn't emphasize as strongly as Lokanath Goswami did. Lokanath Goswami said, I will not give you my blessings unless you absolutely pledge, and made him really vow. So we don't even practically get the name of Lokanath Goswami, but we do get a mention of Gopal Bhatta Goswami, but very limited. Srila Jiva Goswami has written in the beginning of his Tattva Sandarbha, a devotee from southern India who was born in a Brahmin family and was a very intimate friend of Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, has written a book that he has not compiled chronologically. Therefore I, a tiny living entity known as Jiva, am trying to assort the events of the book chronologically, consulting the direction of great personalities like Madhvacharya, Sridhar Swami, Ramanujacharya, and other senior Vaishnavas in the distinct succession. In the beginning of the Bhagavat Sandarbha, there is a similar statement by Jiva Goswami. Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami compiled a book called Satkriya Sarya Dipika, edited the Hari Bhakti Vilas. He actually edited and published it, wrote a foreword to the Sat Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami and a commentary on the Krishna Karnamrita, and installed the Radharaman deity in Vrindavan. In the Gaura Ganadhesh Deepika 184, it is mentioned that his previous name in the pastimes of Lord Krishna was Ananga Manjari. This is difficult to appreciate because Baladev Prabhu is also Ananga Manjari, and Janava Mata is also Ananga Manjari. Ananga Manjari is the younger sister of Sri Radhika, but she's not a Manjari. It's a misconception many times. People think that she was a she's not a Manjari, she's a Sakhi, because she associates with Gopinath directly. We have here in the temple, Gopinath with Ananga Manjari on one side, Radhika Letsa. She has her Swananda Sukara Kunj in the middle of Radha Kund, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur calls his ashram Swananda Sukara Kunj. Sometimes he is also said to have been an incarnation of Guna Manjari. Srinivasacharya and Gopinath Pujari were two of his disciples. So we'll stop there. So this is very ecstatic reading to come in contact directly with all these amazing personalities who constitute the tree of devotional service that Mahaprabhu is manifesting in this world. He's not just manifesting his teachings. How can he manifest his teachings without all his associates who actually perform the activities of manifesting the teachings? He's just indoctrinating them, impregnating all the philosophies within their hearts, and then they are expounding that to the world and spreading his mission. So this is the method of Mahaprabhu, how he broadcasts these teachings of Manjari Bhav, Braja Prem, these most esoteric teachings all over the planet through these amazing personalities. So Sri Sachinandan Gaura Hari Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, O Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, O Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gaura Hari Bol. Gau Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhavibhaja, Patitanam Pavnebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha.